We are born into a body, and very early on, we begin to call it my body. Then over the years, everything that becomes attached to us, our name, family, clothes, possessions, even our emotions, we naturally assume as mine. This sense of ownership, initially harmless, eventually becomes the root of our suffering. This story begins with Huang, a 35-year-old man, successful, healthy, and confident. He had everything people typically desire: a thriving business, a luxurious home, a beautiful car, a lovely girlfriend, and above all, a strong, well-maintained body built through years of gym workouts and strict dieting. Huang was always proud of his body. He would say, "I know how to live. I love myself. I take care of my health. I am in control of myself." Every morning, Huang would look into the mirror, groom his hair, and carefully choose his clothes. Not just to look good, but to affirm, "This is me, and I control my life." Wherever he went, he left an impression. Dynamic, strong, decisive. But deep within those eyes was something even Huang himself didn't realize. Fear. He feared aging, illness, losing his physique, his image deteriorating. And most of all, he feared not being himself if his body changed. During a routine medical checkup, doctors discovered irregularities in his heart. At first, they only advised monitoring. But in the months that followed, Huang began feeling tired, short of breath. And one day, he collapsed during a meeting. He woke up in a hospital bed, IV lines in his arm, face pale. For the first time in his life, he felt weak. His once confident stride was reduced to unsteady steps. Lying silently, staring at the white ceiling, he was overcome by stillness. He began to feel afraid. Everything seemed to be slipping out of his hands. His body, the very thing he thought was his greatest asset, the thing he worked so hard to maintain, was now betraying him. His heart no longer beat at his command. His hands trembled while signing documents. Sleepless nights plagued him, regardless of how many sedatives he took. At that moment, Hoang remembered a visit to a temple with a friend where he once heard a monk say, "This body is not ours. It is made of the four elements: earth, water, wind, and fire. When the conditions are right, it remains. When they're not, it dissolves." Back then, he hadn't paid much attention. But now, lying in the hospital, those words struck his heart like nails. He began to ask himself, what do I truly control? Do I really own this body? If I tell my heart not to race, will it listen? If I wish not to age, can I make that happen? From these questions, he embarked on a new journey of discovery. It was no longer a race to control, but a path to understand, to let go, and to accept. He started reading about impermanence, emptiness, and the Buddhist teachings in the Satipatthana Sutta. This body is impermanent, is suffering, is non-self, is impure. At first, he read merely for comfort, but as he continued, he began to feel a simple truth. Nothing truly belongs to us, not even this body. This body is like a set of clothes we temporarily wear in this lifetime. One day they tear, and we must change them. So why suffer when they wear out? Why fear and cling to what cannot be held? Those days in the hospital became the most precious pause in Huang's life. No more phones, no more work, no more chasing success. Just him and a body slowly weakening. And strangely, as his body declined, his mind grew clearer. He began to smile at each wave of pain, as if greeting an old friend. He stopped resisting. He observed his body as a witness, not an owner. Each breath, each heartbeat became a miracle. Not because he could control them, but because he had learned to be grateful and to let go. And that was the beginning of awakening. From someone who once believed he was the master of his life, Huang began to see himself as a passenger, riding on this vehicle called the body, and learning to smile, to be present, and to dwell peacefully in each moment he still had left to live. After several days in the hospital, Huang returned home with a body weaker than before. The doctor advised him to rest completely, avoid stress, and refrain from any strenuous activity. For someone used to a packed work schedule, regular exercise, and the belief that he was in control of everything, that advice felt like an invisible prison sentence. But Huang complied, partly out of fear, and partly because a faint sense of awakening had already begun to take root since his last hospitalization. He wanted to understand more, not just about his illness, but about himself, about the body he had long assumed to be his own, which now felt unfamiliar and difficult to command. Just a few days later, his body spoke up again. One morning while washing his face, Huang suddenly felt dizzy. The world spun. He collapsed to the floor, hitting the corner of a table. Everything went dark. When he woke up, he was back in the hospital. This time it was more serious. The fall had caused a minor fracture in his hip, which had to be immobilized. More importantly, doctors diagnosed him with vestibular disorder and an irregular heartbeat, putting him at risk of fainting at any time. Persistent fatigue and pain running from his back down his legs left Huang unable to walk on his own for several weeks. He had to rely on his younger brother to help him stand. Simple tasks like bathing, getting dressed, shaving, things he once did without thinking, now required assistance. A wave of helplessness, shame, and frustration flooded his heart. He began to ask, "Why me? I didn't live recklessly. I used to be so healthy." But these questions had no answers. They only echoed back at him, like a broken mirror reflecting the image of a man floundering within his own body. Then one night, after his brother helped him into bed and left, Huang lay there in silence. The room was quiet, save for the ticking of a clock. Suddenly, tears streamed down his face, uncontrollably, not from pain, but from wounded pride. His ego, the strong man who once thought he owned his life, was crumbling piece by piece. In that moment, he remembered a saying, "This body is not real. It's like a bubble, like foam on water. Observe it, do not identify with it." Words that once felt like distant theory now became the closest truth he knew. From that day on, Huang began to shift his perspective. He started practicing deep breathing. With each inhale, he felt his lungs expand, warmth spreading across his chest. With each exhale, he noticed his body softening. Though small, these actions felt like a rebirth. He began to call each pain a friend who reminds me. Every time he couldn't stand up on his own, he closed his eyes and whispered, "This is the body, not me. It has limits, and I am learning to accept those limits." Huang began keeping a journal, not of achievements or work, but of his sensations, his pain, the emotions that rose and fell. One day he wrote, "Today I couldn't make it out to the balcony like usual. I felt sad, but I let go. I see this body like an ocean wave, sometimes rising, sometimes falling. I simply sit on the shore, quietly watching." Gradually, he stopped complaining. Each morning upon waking, he looked at his hands and said, "Thank you for still being able to move today." Each night, he massaged his legs and told them, "Thank you for carrying me all these years." The illness remained, but his heart had changed. He no longer feared. He no longer saw his body as a burden. Instead, he felt a deep gratitude for every part of his body that was still present, even if no longer perfect. From that point, Huang entered a new phase, not just understanding the body, but beginning to question all the other things he had once claimed as mine: his family, his lover, his cherished relationships. And, as life would have it, just when he began to understand himself more deeply, a new loss arrived, this time from his mother, the woman he once believed would always be there. After many months of treatment, Huang's body gradually recovered. Though he still couldn't move as freely as before, he was able to walk and take care of himself again. However, the greatest change wasn't in his body, it was in how he viewed the world. One question continued to echo in his mind: if this body is not mine, then what truly belongs to me? One day he decided to return to his hometown to visit his mother. She lived alone in a small house on the outskirts of the city. It had been nearly a year since his last visit. Life, work, then illness had kept him away. But this time, he felt an overwhelming urge to go back. As the car stopped in front of the gate, unlike every other time, his mother didn't come out to greet him. Huang walked inside and found her curled up in bed, her face pale. A neighbor told him she had fallen a few days ago and now had trouble walking. The sight froze him in place. The woman who once stood strong, who had led him through countless seasons of life, now appeared small and fragile, like a child. He stayed and cared for her for a week. He cooked, massaged her limbs, helped her take each slow step. Every evening he sat by her bedside, listening to her tell old stories, things he once had no patience to hear. But this time he sat silently, absorbing every word like sipping the last drops from a drying stream. Then one night, his mother looked at him for a long time and softly said, "I'm getting old. Don't be sad when the day comes that I'm no longer here." Huang held her hand tightly, eyes brimming with tears, not because he hadn't thought of that day, but because now, more than ever, he deeply understood. No one stays with us forever. When his mother passed, he didn't scream or cry. He simply sat still beside her coffin, looked at her portrait, and whispered, "I know. You were just a guest in my life, and I'm grateful you stayed for as long as you did." From that loss, he began to look back at other relationships. An old lover, a best friend who once swore loyalty, a mentor, a colleague. All of them had once been close, once loved, once made promises, and yet one by one, they had stepped out of his life, each in their own way. In the past, he had blamed, he had hurt, he had felt betrayed, but now he felt peace. He remembered the Buddha's words, "When love is true, even mountains can be moved. But when the bond is gone, a blink of an eye is enough to turn away." He began to understand. Suffering doesn't come from people leaving. It comes from clinging to the idea that they'll stay forever. When there is no clinging, there is no suffering. When we love without possessing, only then are we truly free. Huang wrote in his journal, "Mother is gone, but her love remains in every action, every memory. She no longer loves me, but I no longer blame her. My friend left, but I'm grateful they once walked beside me." From then on, Huang began to let go of people, not out of apathy, but with unconditional love, without holding on, without demands. And then a greater question arose. If no one belongs to me, and not even this body is mine, then who am I? After his mother's funeral, Huang didn't return to the city right away. He took a few more weeks off and went to a small monastery near his hometown to rest and reflect, partly to escape work, partly to listen more deeply to himself after all the turbulence. The monastery was nestled among pine trees, where the wind whispered gently, wind chimes softly rang, and the scent of incense floated lightly in the air. Every morning, Huang woke up at 4 a.m. to join the monastics in sitting meditation and chanting. At first, it was out of courtesy, but gradually he began to feel his heart being soothed. Sitting still in the meditation hall, back straight, hands resting lightly on his knees, eyes gently closed, breath flowing in and out, Huang began to observe his body in a new way. No longer as something to maintain or build an image with, but as a bundle of matter constantly changing, arising and passing away in every moment. Some days he felt numbness in his legs, aching knees, sore shoulders. These sensations came and went, then came again and went again. No feeling stayed forever. Just like himself, no emotion had ever lasted eternally. Joy came, sadness left. Fear rose, then settled. Love blossomed, then faded. One day during a Dharma talk, the abbot said, "Ask yourself, who is aware of the pain in your legs? Who is breathing? Who is thinking? If this body is not you, then what is observing it?" That question left Huang speechless. Yes, if all sensations, thoughts, and actions are merely arising and passing phenomena, then what is it that knows them? That awareness, unborn, undying, unaffected by time, could it be the truest part of who we are? He began to practice deeper meditation, not only while sitting, but also while walking, eating, and washing his face. Every activity was done with full attention and presence. When eating, he tasted the sweetness of fruit, the fragrance of warm rice, and even heard the softest sound of his spoon touching the bowl. When walking, every step touching the earth connected him back to life. Gradually, he saw clearly, this body is not me. This emotion is not me. This thought is not me. The I if it could still be called that, was merely a stream of awareness, ever watching, ever mindful, but unattached. He wrote in his journal, "This body is like a river. It changes every day, each cell, each chemical reaction. If I cling to it as a fixed me, I will suffer. But if I see it as a vehicle, I can live as lightly as a drifting cloud." After 3 weeks at the monastery, Huang realized he no longer wanted to return to his old way of working. He wrote to the company's board and stepped down from his executive position. He wanted to spend the rest of his time living slowly, sharing what he had learned and seeking true peace, not from the outside, but from within. His friends were surprised. Some thought he had lost motivation. Others expressed regret, but Huang simply smiled. "I haven't lost anything. I'm just finding my way back to myself after many years of being lost." He didn't reject the material world, but he understood deeply. This body will decay. These emotions will pass. Every relationship will eventually part ways. So the only thing truly worth preserving is mindfulness. Mindfulness to live truthfully in the present. Mindfulness to not be swept away by desire, anger, or fear. Mindfulness so that he no longer had to ask, "What belongs to me?" but instead quietly smile at everything, just as it is. A year after stepping down from his executive role, Huang was living a completely different life. He rented a small house on the edge of a mountain. Each morning he meditated. At noon he read books. In the afternoon, he walked through the forest. And in the evening, he wrote quietly under the soft glow of a yellow lamp. His life was no longer glamorous. No fancy house or luxury car, no meetings, no fame. Yet he had never felt so free. His body was still weak. Sometimes his hands trembled when lifting objects. Sometimes his chest ached when the weather changed. But he no longer worried. He cared for his body as one would tend a flower. Knowing it wouldn't last forever, he felt grateful for every time it still bloomed. When it wilted, he accepted. No more fear, no more clinging, only presence and love. One day he visited an old friend in the hospital, someone who had once surpassed him in career success. The man had suffered a stroke, was paralyzed on one side, and his eyes were full of panic. Upon seeing Huang, he broke into tears. "I worked so hard but still couldn't hold on to this body. So what was the point of it all?" Huang sat beside him, held his hand, and gently said, "We cannot keep the body, but we can keep the mind. A peaceful mind will stay with us, even when the body no longer remains whole." Leaving the hospital that day, Huang felt more clearly than ever. True freedom doesn't come from a strong body or favorable circumstances, but from the ability to let go, bit by bit, of all attachments to things that were never truly ours. He began teaching meditation to a small group in the village, not as doctrine, not by force, just gently guiding them to sit still, to breathe, and to observe body and mind. He would say, "We do not abandon the body. We care for it like a dear friend. But let us not mistake it for who we are." Whenever someone asked him why he had changed, he simply smiled. "Because I no longer believe that I am this body." Then one day, while watching the sunset, he felt an extraordinary sense of peace. Not an overwhelming joy, not an emotional surge, just a stillness, clear and quiet, like a lake without a ripple. He thought of his mother, of those who had passed through his life, of his youth now gone, of the body growing older day by day. And he understood all of these had shaped the person he had become, not to be clung to, but to be released. He wrote the final lines in his journal. "I no longer seek anything. Each morning I wake and feel the breath still flowing. That is enough. Each night I sit in silence. That is precious. I don't know how much time I have left, but I know every moment I remain awake is a gift." Huang didn't become a Zen master. He didn't open a temple. He didn't preach. But he became a living example of one simple truth. Only when we let go of the body do we truly begin to live. Not letting go out of denial, but letting go with love, with gratitude, and with deep understanding that this body is not me, not mine, not my true self. And because of that, every moment still present within this body, is a miracle.